She was supposed to be walking down the aisle, but instead, she disappeared without a trace. A beautiful bride, a dream wedding, shattered in an instant. No goodbyes, no struggle, just gone. For 10 years, her case haunted investigators until a chilling discovery in a remote forest changed everything. But what they found wasn't just horrifying, it revealed a secret no one saw coming. If you enjoy deep dives into shocking true crime stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring you more gripping cases just like this one. On a warm summer afternoon in June 1982, Emma Caldwell was about to experience the happiest day of her life. The 26-year-old kindergarten teacher from Charleston, South Carolina, was set to marry her high school sweetheart, Jake Reynolds, in an elegant garden ceremony. Friends and family gathered at the venue, sipping champagne, laughing, and waiting for the moment Emma would step out in her flowing white gown. But she never did. At first, no one panicked. Maybe she needed a moment to compose herself. Maybe she was having cold feet. But as minutes turned into an hour, an unsettling feeling crept over the crowd. The bridal suite was empty. Emma's phone was on the counter, still charging. Her dress? Still hanging on the closet door, untouched. Emma Caldwell had vanished, without a trace. The search began immediately. Charleston police combed the area, questioning guests, staff, even the groom. Jake was devastated, his hands trembling as he told detectives he had no idea where Emma could be. There were no signs of forced entry, no security footage showing her leaving the venue, no suspicious vehicles. It was as if she had been erased from existence. But then, a shocking detail emerged. A bridesmaid, Claire Matthews, told police she had seen Emma just minutes before she disappeared. Standing outside, speaking with someone, a man. A man no one could identify. Claire described him as tall, wearing a dark suit. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't part of the wedding party. And most chilling of all, when Claire glanced back, both Emma and the man were gone. As the days turned to weeks, investigators scoured Emma's life for anything that might explain her sudden disappearance. That's when they uncovered something disturbing. Emma had received an anonymous note just a week before her wedding. The note was simple. Just 5 words. You don't know the truth. What truth? And who sent it? Years passed. Leads dried up. The case turned cold. Jake moved away, unable to bear the weight of losing the woman he loved. Emma's parents, heartbroken, clung to hope that one day she would come home. Then, in 1992, 10 years after Emma's disappearance, a group of hikers stumbled upon something horrifying deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, over 200 miles away from where Emma was last seen. Buried beneath a pile of leaves and rocks was a tattered piece of white fabric, a wedding veil. Nearby, they found a rusted locket. Inside, there was a photo of Emma Caldwell. The discovery of Emma Caldwell's wedding veil and locket sent shockwaves through the investigative community. After 10 years of unanswered questions, it finally seemed like the case was breaking open. But one chilling fact remained. There was no body, no remains, just a veil, a locket, and a deep sense of unease. The hikers who found the items immediately reported them to authorities, and within hours, forensic teams arrived at a secluded section of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The location was remote, far from any well-traveled paths. Whoever had left Emma's belongings there clearly hadn't wanted them to be found. But why leave them there at all? Was it a taunt? A mistake? Or something far more sinister? Investigators carefully combed the area, hoping to find more clues. What they uncovered sent shivers down their spines. Roughly 20 feet from where the locket had been discovered, a shallow depression in the earth caught the attention of the forensic team. It looked disturbed, as if someone had dug there before and recently tried to cover it back up. What they unearthed next changed the entire course of the investigation. Digging through the damp earth, investigators soon uncovered a small wooden box, wrapped tightly in a decayed plastic tarp. The wood was cracked, worn by time, but something about it felt deliberate, like a message was waiting inside. When they pried the lid open, the team fell silent. Inside were several items. A delicate pearl bracelet, Emma's, confirmed by her mother. A dried bouquet of white roses, now brittle and crumbling. A Polaroid photo, old and faded. It showed Emma, but she wasn't alone. She was standing in front of a rustic cabin, deep in the woods. Her expression was hard to read. Was she scared, confused, or something else entirely? But it wasn't just Emma in the picture. A man stood beside her, his arm wrapped tightly around his shoulders. His face was hidden, blurred out, as if intentionally scratched over. Someone didn't want him identified, and scrawled on the back of the photo, in smeared ink, were just 4 words. "She's still out there." The revelation ignited a new wave of questions. Had Emma been alive after her wedding day? Had she been taken? If so, was she still alive now? Detectives turned their focus back to the original investigation. That mysterious man at the wedding, the one Emma had been seen talking to before she vanished, was he the key to unlocking the truth? But there was something else, something that had slipped through the cracks a decade earlier. Emma had once told her best friend Claire something strange, something that didn't make sense at the time. 2 months before the wedding, Emma had confided in Claire that she had an eerie feeling that someone was watching her. At first, she brushed it off, chalking it up to wedding stress. But then, things started happening. Her car alarm would go off randomly in the middle of the night. She received silent phone calls, never a voice, just breathing. One night, she swore she saw a figure standing across the street from her apartment, just standing there, staring. Could it have been him? The man in the photo? Using the photo as a clue, investigators began searching for the mysterious cabin. It wasn't easy. The mountains were vast, and there were hundreds of abandoned structures scattered throughout. But after months of searching, they found a match. Tucked deep within the forest, nearly 15 miles from where Emma's belongings were discovered, sat a crumbling wooden cabin. The door hung loosely on its hinges. Vines curled up the rotting walls. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, dust covered nearly everything, except for one spot, the kitchen table. There, sitting perfectly in the center, was a single sheet of paper. Fresh, new, placed there recently. It contained just 3 words, written in large, uneven letters. "Do not dig." The ominous note, "Do not dig," sat untouched on the wooden table inside the decaying cabin. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, as if written in haste. But the message was clear. Someone didn't want investigators searching further. The discovery sent chills through the team. The fact that the paper was new, untouched by dust or decay, meant that someone had been there recently, watching, waiting. And that meant they might not be alone. Tension hung in the air as officers secured the scene, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the shadows. The cabin was small, just a single room with a rusted wood-burning stove, a creaky bed, and a boarded-up window. The walls were covered in scratches, as if someone had spent hours, or years, dragging their nails across the wood. And then, in the farthest corner of the room, they found something even more disturbing. A single white high-heeled shoe, covered in date. Emma's mother confirmed it instantly. It was her daughter's. But there was no sign of Emma. No blood, no remains. Only the shoe, the note, and the overwhelming feeling that they were too late, or still in danger. As officers continued searching, one of them noticed something strange, a rug in the middle of the wooden floor. It looked out of place, newer than everything else in the cabin. Slowly, they peeled it back, revealing a rusted metal trapdoor. The air in the cabin turned ice cold. One officer pried it open, his flashlight revealing a set of narrow wooden stairs leading into pitch-black darkness. A foul, rotting smell wafted up from below. Someone had been down there recently. The team descended, weapons drawn, every step creaking under their weight. The air grew heavier, damp, suffocating. Then, their flashlights hit something in the darkness. Chains, rusting metal chains, bolted to the walls. The basement was a nightmare, a makeshift holding cell with a stained mattress, broken furniture, and old food containers scattered across the floor. But it wasn't just any basement. This place had been used. Someone had been kept here. That's when they saw the writing on the wall. Carved deep into the stone, over and over again, were the words, "He won't let me go." The letters were frantic, uneven, desperate. This wasn't just an old crime scene. This was a prison. And the worst part? The most recent carving was less than a week old. Emma's case was no longer just a missing person investigation. It was something far darker. Someone had taken her. Someone had kept her. But the bigger question was she still alive? Investigators dug into old missing persons reports, searching for similar abductions or patterns. That's when they uncovered a disturbing connection. Emma wasn't the first. Over the past 15 years, 4 other women had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances, vanishing without a trace just days before their weddings. None of them were ever found. And there was one chilling detail that tied them together. Each woman had reported being watched in the weeks leading up to their disappearance. Just like Emma. Despite the warning on the note, "Do not dig," detectives knew they had to search the property. If Emma, or any of the other missing women, had been kept here, there was a chance their bodies were still nearby. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Within minutes, they alerted to an area just behind the cabin. The ground was soft, disturbed. Someone had buried something there. The digging started immediately. The deeper they went, the worse the smell became, a mix of decay, damp earth, and something else. Something unnatural. And then, the shovel hit wood. A box. Old, weathered, roughly the size of a coffin. The officers hesitated. What was inside could change everything. Carefully, they pried open the lid, and what they found inside left them speechless. It wasn't a body. It was a message. A videotape. A VHS tape labeled in bold black marker. Wedding night. The VHS tape, labeled Wedding Night, sat in the date, covered in dust and grime. The officers who had unearthed it stayed in silence, dread creeping into their minds. Why bury a tape instead of body? Was this a sick game, a confession, or something even worse? With no way to play the tape on site, the forensic team carefully bagged it, treating it like the piece of evidence that could finally crack this case. Within hours, the tape was in a crime lab, where technicians scrambled to find an old VCR that could play it. When they finally hit play, what they saw sent shivers down their spines. Static, then blackness. A flickering image appeared. The screen showed a dimly lit room, the kind illuminated by a single hanging light bulb. The camera was slightly tilted, as if set up in a hurry. And then, movement. A woman. She was sitting in a chair, her hands tied behind her back, her long brown hair falling over her face. Her breath came in short, rapid bursts, as if she'd been crying. Investigators went back to the VHS tape, studying every detail in the background of the footage. If Emma had been filmed alive, there had to be another location, somewhere the killer had been keeping her. That's when they made another breakthrough. One of the forensic analysts noticed something barely visible in the reflection of Emma's Tay-streaked eyes. A storage unit door. There was a distinct number painted on it. Number 047. Detectives scoured local storage facilities, searching for any unit matching the number 047. They found one. A storage facility just 30 miles away, rented out under a fake name. The lease had been renewed every year, for over a decade. Was Emma inside? The SWAT team arrived just before sunrise. This time, they weren't taking any chances. If Emma was alive, they had to move fast. Bolt cutters snapped through the metal lock, the sound echoing through the empty lot. The second the doors were pulled open, a wave of stale air rushed out. The stench of mildew, dampness, and something else. Inside, the storage unit was filled with old furniture, broken picture frames, and stacks of videotapes. And then, at the very back, a large wooden crate, padlocked. The officers forced it open. Inside was a small, enclosed space, like a makeshift cell. The walls were padded, chains were bolted into the floor, and lying in the corner, wrapped in an old, tattered blanket, was a wedding dress, Emma's wedding dress. But Emma herself was nowhere to be found. And then, a single sound from somewhere deep in the storage unit. A footstep. Someone else was there with them. The sound of a footstep sent a jolt of adrenaline through the SWAT team. Someone was inside the storage unit with them. Weapons were raised. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Every shadow became a potential threat. The officers moved in formation, scanning every inch of the cramped, suffocating space. Then, another sound, a slow, deliberate inhale. A breath. Someone was hiding. "Come out with your hands up," one officer barked, his voice sharp and commanding. Then, from behind a tower of discarded furniture, a figure emerged. A man, tall, gaunt, dressed in black. His unkempt hair hung in greasy strands around his face. His eyes, sunken, hollow, but alive with something twisted. He wasn't running. He wasn't fighting. He was smiling. "You're too late," he whispered. Before anyone could react, he lifted his left hand, the same one that had been seen in the VHS tape, the one wearing the gold watch. The killer had been here all along. But what did he mean by too late? Officers tackled him to the ground. His wrists were bound in handcuffs, but the eerie smirk never left his face. He didn't fight. He didn't beg. He just sat there, breathing slow and steady, his gaze locked on the wooden crate where Emma's wedding dress had been found. "Where is she?" an officer demanded. The man licked his cracked lips, tilting his head like he was amused. "You'll never find her." It wasn't an admission of guilt. It was a challenge. And then, before officers could process what was happening, he did something unthinkable. His jaw clenched, his body seized. He collapsed, convulsing violently. A foamy, white liquid leaked from the corners of his mouth. His skin turned a ghastly shade of gray. He was dying. He swallowed something. An officer shouted, "A cyanide capsule." Before they could stop him, the man let out one final choke gasp. Then, nothing. The only living person who knew where Emma was had just taken his own life. Forensic teams searched the storage unit, combing through every tape, every box, every inch of the horrific lair where this man had operated for over a decade. That's when they found another door. It was almost invisible, hidden behind a metal shelf filled with old clothes. When officers forced it open, they were met with a steep, narrow staircase. A basement. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something rotting. Descending carefully, the officers' flashlights landed on something strange. A series of photographs pinned to the damp concrete walls. Each photo showed a different woman. Some were smiling, dressed in elegant gowns. Others looked terrified, eyes wide with panic. But there was one thing they all had in common. They were all wearing wedding dresses. This wasn't just a killer. This was a collector, a hunter, a man who saw himself as a groom to every woman he abducted. And Emma? She had been his latest bride. But had she been his last? That's when they saw it, the final photo pinned to the wall. Emma, dressed in her wedding gown. But this wasn't a photo from her real wedding day. No, this was something else. She was inside a dimly lit room, a candle burning beside her. Her wrists were bound. But her eyes weren't just filled with terror. They were pleading. And scrawled beneath the photo, written in thick, uneven letters, was a single date. March 27th, 2015. Tomorrow. The number March 27th, 2015 was scrawled beneath Emma's terrified face in the photograph. Tomorrow. The implication sent an icy chill through the officer's veins. If the date meant what they thought it did, then Emma was still alive. And Weiss, whatever was planned for her, hadn't happened yet. The storage unit had been a dead end. The man responsible, whoever he really was, had taken his own life before revealing any information. And yet, the date. It was deliberate. It was a message. And Emma was running out of time. Desperate for answers, investigators went through every piece of evidence again. The VHS tape, the hidden basement, the 6 murdered women buried under Mike's Gas and Repair. Nothing gave them an exact location. Then, something clicked. One of the officers recognized the candles in the photograph. Not just their shape or size, but the design. They weren't ordinary candles. They were funeral candles, and they belonged to a very specific place. Deep in the outskirts of Charleston, tucked away behind miles of dense forest, was a place few people remembered, an abandoned chapel. It had been built in the 1800s, once serving as a church for a small farming community. But in 1987, it was permanently shut down after a fire destroyed part of the structure. Rumors swirled that the chapel was haunted, a place where people went missing, but no official crimes were ever linked to it. Until now. The candles in Emma's photo matched those used in that very chapel. It was a wedding venue, and it was the only lead they had left. Before dawn, a full tactical team was dispatched to the abandoned chapel. Drones were sent ahead. Snipers took positions. SWAT officers prepared for the worst. If Emma was inside, she was not alone. Someone had planned this. a ceremony, a ritual, and they weren't going to let her go without a fight. The air was thick with mist as the officers approached the rotting wooden doors. They listened. No voices, no movement, just the creaking of the trees and the distant howl of the wind. Then, a sound, slow, eerie humming. It was coming from inside. The doors creaked open, revealing a long, dark aisle. Candles flickered on either side, their dim glow casting shadows across the ruined pews. At the far end, near the altar, stood something that made the officer's blood run cold. A figure, a woman in a wedding dress. Emma. She stood completely still, her face obscured by a tattered veil. Her hands were bound together in front of her, but she wasn't fighting. She wasn't screaming. She was waiting. And in front of her, a man, dressed in a groom's suit. His back was turned to the officers, his posture rigid, unnatural. The humming grew louder. Then, the man moved. He lifted his hands toward Emma's face. But before he could touch her, hands up! A deafening bang. The candles flickered violently, and in that split second, the figure of the groom vanished. Officers stormed the chapel, weapons raised. Emma didn't move, didn't flinch. It was as if she were in some trance. The man who had been standing in front of her, gone, but there was nowhere to run. No exits, no doors, no possible way he could have escaped. Yet he was no longer there. Then, Emma finally spoke. Her voice was hollow, weak, terrified. "He's still here." Emma's whispered warning sent a shiver down the spines of the officers. "He's still here." Yet, the so-called groom had vanished into thin air. The SWAT team moved quickly, sweeping the darkened corners of the decaying chapel. There were no doors, no trapdoors, no secret passages. And yet, the man was gone. Emma stood frozen, her thin frame trembling. She was still wearing the same wedding dress from the old VHS footage. The fabric was stained, torn, and smelled of damp earth and candle wax. Her wrists were bound with silk ribbons, the knots tied too precisely to be her own. One officer reached for her, speaking gently. "Emma, you're safe now." Her sunken eyes met his. "No, I'm not." The team quickly escorted Emma outside. The cold night air hit her, but she barely reacted. She was in shock, her body stiff, her breathing shallow. One officer wrapped a blanket around her as the paramedics checked her vitals. She wasn't just cold. She was malnourished, dehydrated. She had clearly been starved for days, if not longer. But there was something else. Something off. Despite her frail state, her hands were clenched into fists. She was holding something. When the paramedics gently pried her fingers open, a small slip of paper fell to the ground. 3 words were scrawled across it in smudged, jagged ink. Not the first. The team had assumed Emma was the only one. The only bride. The only victim still alive. But the note suggested something far worse. She wasn't the first bride. And if that was true, she might not be the last. As Emma was rushed to a hospital, officers turned their attention back to the abandoned chapel. If Emma had been kept alive, then maybe others had too. They searched every inch of the crumbling wooden structure, looking for any sign of a hidden passage. Then, in the altar, one officer noticed something. The floorboard beneath the altar rug was loose. When they pulled the rug back, they saw it, a metal handle, a trapdoor. Slowly, they lifted it. A gust of stale air rushed out, thick with the smell of earth and decay. A staircase led downward, disappearing into complete darkness. Weapons raised, flashlights cutting through the gloom. They descended, and what they found was worse than anyone imagined. At the bottom of the stairs was a chamber. Lined along the walls were mannequins, each wearing a wedding dress. Some were new, others were yellowed and decayed. But between the mannequins, there were cages, metal cages, just big enough for a human body. And inside some of them, skeletal remains. But one of the cages was different, because it wasn't empty. A woman. She was curled into a shaking ball, arms wrapped around her knees. Her hair was matted, her dress filthy, her face gaunt and hollow. But she was alive. Her lips trembled as she whispered something. At first, they could barely hear it. Then, as they moved closer, it became clear. "He's still here." The exact same words Emma had spoken. And then, somewhere in the pitch-black crypt, a floorboard creaked. The woman in the cage was alive. She clutched the rusted bars, her frail hands trembling. Her lips moved again, whispering the same haunting words Emma had spoken just minutes earlier. "He's still here." The SWAT team froze. Then, a creak. Somewhere in the darkness, the unmistakable sound of a floorboard shifting. Every weapon in the room snapped toward the noise. Flashlight sliced through the shadows, revealing nothing but the cold, stone walls of the underground chamber. But someone was there, watching, waiting, hunting. One officer moved to the woman's cage, trying to pry it open. "You're safe now," he said, his voice controlled but urgent. She shook her head, her wide, sunken eyes darting around the room. "No," she whispered. "You don't understand." Her breath hitched, and she slowly pointed toward the mannequins dressed in their tattered, ghostly wedding gowns. "Here's one of them." The officers turned toward the row of mannequins, their plastic faces staring blankly ahead. Each one stood motionless, draped in yellowed lace and rotting silk. Except one. One moved, a blur of black and white. One of the mannequins lunged forward. It wasn't a mannequin at all. The groom had been standing among them the entire time. Before anyone could react, he grabbed the nearest officer, dragging him into the shadows with inhuman speed. A scream, a struggle, then silence. The remaining officers opened fire. Gunshots echoed in the small space, the muzzle flashes lighting up the twisted underground crypt. But the bullets hit nothing. The groom had vanished again. The cage finally burst open, and the woman inside stumbled forward, grabbing the lead officer's vest. Her fingers dug into his uniform, her voice hoarse from years of screaming in the dark. "You have to burn it," she gasped. The officer stared at her. "Burn what?" Her eyes, wild, desperate, locked onto his. "The chapel, burn it to the ground. If you don't, he'll keep coming back." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then, above them, a loud crash. Something was moving upstairs. The team rushed up the stone steps, weapons drawn. The wooden floorboards above groaned under the weight of something heavy. Something pacing. The once barren wooden altar was now covered in candles, their flame flickering wildly as if disturbed by a gust of wind. And in the center, a new wedding dress. Fresh, untouched, waiting for its next bride. The officers moved fast. The woman from the cage clung to one of them, barely able to stand, her breath ragged from exhaustion. But her warning echoed in their heads. "You have to burn it." They had seen enough to believe her. One officer pulled a canister from his pack, kerosene. Another flicked open a lighter. But before the flame could catch, a low, chilling laugh rolled through the chapel. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The candles on the altar flickered wildly, as if something unseen was moving through the room. Then, the wedding dress shifted. It lifted from the altar on its own. Suspended in the air by an unseen force, the veil slowly lifted, revealing a hollow void where a face should have been. The groom was still here. The doors of the chapel slammed shut. The air grew thick, heavy, wrong. And then, the walls began to close in. The stained glass windows shattered inward, sending razor-sharp shards cascading to the ground. The wooden pews splintered and cracked, twisting like they were alive. A presence pressed down on them, suffocating, consuming. Then, from the shadows behind the altar, the groom stepped forward. His suit was pristine. His golden eyes gleamed. He did not run. He did not hide. He simply smiled. "This is my wedding." His voice echoed in the empty chapel. "And none of you are leaving." The officers opened fire. Bullets tore through the groom's form, but they hit nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't bleed, didn't stop. Instead, he lifted his hand. The shadows exploded outward. One officer was lifted off his feet, hurled into a shattered pew with a sickening crunch. Another was yanked backward by something unseen, dragged screaming into the darkness. The woman from the cage collapsed, covering her ears, rocking back and forth. "Burn it," she sobbed. "Burn it now." The lead officer dropped the lighter. The flame touched the kerosene, and the floor erupted. Flames roared to life, licking up the walls, racing across the wooden beams. The fire moved fast, too fast. The entire chapel became an inferno in seconds. The groom's golden eyes flashed with rage. For the first time, he staggered. The fire wasn't just destroying the chapel. It was destroying him. His shadowy form began to flicker. His perfect suit blackened, turning to ash, and his smile faltered. No, his voice was raw, almost afraid. Then, he lunged at Emma. Emma did not run. She had spent 10 years running. Not anymore. As the groom reached for her, she grabbed the veil from the floating dress and tore it apart. A horrific scream erupted from the groom. The veil disintegrated in her hands, turning to smoke. The groom collapsed. His golden eyes dimmed. His body began to break apart, consumed by the very fire he had tried to control. And as the flames engulfed him, his final words slithered through the air. "This isn't over." Then, he was gone. The roof collapsed. The officers barely made it outside before the entire chapel caved in, sending a cloud of burning embers into the night sky. Emma stumbled forward, coughing, her hands shaking. The woman from the cage clung to her side, tears streaking her soot-covered face. They watched as the last remains of the cursed chapel crumbled into nothing. It was over. Or so they thought. Days passed. Emma tried to return to normal, tried to forget. But every night, as she closed her eyes, she heard it. A faint, distant whisper. A voice that should not have existed. "Till death do us part." The groom wasn't finished. Not yet. Some called it a case of mass hysteria. Others believed something far worse.